Welcome to Mark My Words, a podcast that not only aims to inspire and teach the listener about entrepreneurship, it also aims to give my guests an opportunity to talk about their unique journey in entrepreneurship and life. So join me and my guests as we meet at the crossroads on Mark My Words. Ever since today's guest, Dara Erck, has come to my attention, I have thought a lot about my own journey growing up, especially as a teenager. And I always kind of felt, even to this day, even when I was living as a teenager, I felt like I really needed more support. I really often felt like people were working a little more against me than for me. And when I started getting ready and prepping for this episode with Dara, who is the founder of Sam and Leo, and just to kind of summarize what that is, it is let me make sure I read this off correctly for Dara here, but it's a mental health brand dedicated to supporting well-being through a line of specially formulated gummy vitamins. And I will just go to her website and, oh, Dara, I'll of course let you talk and summarize all this more. But for the sake of introducing you, Sam and Leo, these gummy vitamins, they key into certain things that really can help with areas that I think teenagers struggle with. They include sleep, energy, immunity, eyes, which even as an adult, believe me, all the hours I put into my day job, I could certainly use some help with my eyes and relaxation. I think this is a great product and a great cause and awesome stuff that you're advocating for. Welcome to Mark My Words. Maybe I'll let you talk a little bit. How you doing today, Dara?
Good. Thank you so much for having me. And your intro almost made me emotional, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, I try not to shed too many tears on this show, but it definitely when it comes to like support that kids get, especially the teenage years, because I'm not gonna name names. I don't want to turn this show into that kind of a show. But when I look back, I'm just like, boy, I really could have used a little more support, even if it wasn't in the form of a gummy vitamin product. I could have used a lot more support during those years. So I was really excited to do this episode and have this chat because I really love what you're standing behind and advocating here.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think I definitely look at it as a tool. Like the vitamins are just a tool to have a discussion or open up pathways between parents or teachers and kids. And so, like you said, it's not just the product, but also the support our kids need right now and always have needed.
Well, before we get really involved in this topic, I always like to go back in the Wayback Machine, and because I rely on LinkedIn to prep for my episodes, notice that you were really into international studies growing up, but I also see that obviously this is a movement and something that you're very passionate about. So, two-pronged question, I guess. What made you interested in studying international affairs? And was this always something as far as helping teens with their wellness and mental well-being? Was that always something that you wanted to do?
Yeah, good, two good questions. I don't think anyone's asked me. So I think the first one about international studies, I think I've realized it was just in me. I grew up on three dirt roads from a main road, rural Vermont, graduated high school, the same 20 kids I went to kindergarten with, very closed. But I had some exposures early on to the outside world, family in New York City, and I just wanted that so much to explore. And I actually left home when I was 15 to study abroad in New Zealand, and that kind of opened the door to international. And then I was a Senate page in Washington, D.C. And so it's just started this journey into government, civil affairs, international studies. And then my whole education kind of was in that. But I think I've always been an empath and wanting to help. And so naturally, it was in the international development space where I gravitated to, and then headed into a very much, as you saw, a very much global health focus. So that kind of journey was always there for me and very adventurous. I did the first elections in Bosnia after the war. Like scariest place, you put me there. I was like, yes, take me. And then had my own kids and own journey and probably start to realize my own mortality and probably needed a little bit less risk in my life. Um, but in that journey, I was traveling a lot still for work, a lot of Africa, Asia for international work in global health. And as my kids started to grow up and have their own issues, I was like, there's something here. And like my passion in the impact space, but also the broader reach beyond me and also beyond the US, because there's so much support we actually do get in the US and it's not international. So obviously I look beyond that. So anyway, COVID happened. I was sitting on this idea of products for teens. It was just a huge gap in the market. Started with actually in the body care space because I was looking for products for my kids. And then for different reasons, the body care stuff kind of paused. And I was talking to friends and family and other people saying, there's a ton of kid vitamins and there's a ton of adult vitamins and there's no teen vitamins. I was like, you're right. Same for my kids. And just went down that rabbit hole and realized that there really is this big a gap. And not just the multivitamin, in this functional space of like, what are our kids suffering from? And then I'll just say, lots of people ask about ingredients and formulation and how clean it is. And I kind of joke that I raised my kids on all organic, made my own baby food, but they still want Subway and Dr. Pepper or the energy drinks. And so it's like not trying to be make our kids so clean. It's just like it's a support system there. And then for me, the passion is that impact is like, how do we support parents who are trying to support our kids going through this? So
No, so first of all, I thought about having a Dr. Pepper before I even started this. So perhaps maybe if I had somebody like you in my life, like many years ago, maybe I would be thinking of doing something different to get energized and ready for this episode other than Dr. Pepper or Dunkin' refreshers.
totally. And I mean, I will just say one of my biggest challenges with the business is brand awareness because people aren't thinking beyond an energy drink, a caffeine drink. They don't know that there's B complex is an energizing. And so it's just even some awareness around that because we all are programmed to go to the caffeine.
So you talked a little bit about being an empath. You said that you grew up with a group of kids that, you were all very close. Do you think that the combination of your personality traits and, just having that close group, do you think that they all kind of gravitated towards you and that kind of feeds into just how you wound up on the path that you wound up on?
That's a good question. I actually probably would think it's the opposite. I felt probably more like an outlier and couldn't wait to leave that small community. And I appreciate it more. I respect my parents' decision to live there, but I couldn't wait to leave. I was like, get me out of here. I need more than this. And so I think that's a different, but I definitely had a very strong sense of community and where I came from. And like my parents still live in that small town. So I see that. But no, there was an itching to leave.
Yeah, I was kind of the same way when you said outlier, couldn't wait to leave. Right away, I'm like, yep, that was me. Although, as much empathy as I think I have, I definitely was not one of those who had like tons of friends and all that. And I really struggled with just fitting in. And obviously, some of that had to do with things I was born with. I suppose people, had their opinions or reservations, or it was a different time as well. But when you were talking about being an empath and just seeing the direction that you went in, it made me think of somebody that I went to high school with who was very similar in that I felt like everybody just kind of gravitated towards them because of how empathetic they were. But the only difference is we didn't get to see how they could have really grown and evolved. They wound up passing away in a horrific car accident, so we never really got to see their full potential realized. I'm getting off on a tangent that has not as much to do with this, but that's what it
No,
made me think of.
I think I always saw myself as smart but not necessarily popular and saw things probably differently, and maybe it changes now as you get older, but I see it in my own kids. My kids, we've moved a lot every couple of years. They've been in many different schools. They don't have that sense of community, but they don't have this huge group of friends. They also probably like me have one or two close friends, small groups. And I don't push them in that, right? They don't need to be the most popular. They don't need to have 40 friends. One or two is fine. Um, but I definitely think that society puts that pressure on you to be liked or fit in.
Yeah, you don't need to be popular. I mean, the one thing that I've learned, especially as I've gotten older, is I didn't necessarily need to be class president, quarterback of the high school team, all wrapped into one. I just needed to feel support. I needed to feel like people were behind me, believing in me. And if, hey, if I had a dream or something I wanted to do, like I remember one person in particular I said, I really see myself moving away from this area and living in a metro area, whatever I might have told them. And their reaction was like, yeah, you're not going to do that. Like, nobody ever leaves here. And we're kids, so it's like we're much younger, but it's that kind of thing that I feel like obviously I overcame that little conversation, like 2 seconds of my life. But I feel like if I had more people who were really like supporting me and behind me, then maybe I don't even remember that conversation. Maybe that's just like, who cares? And it is who cares, but I feel like I just didn't get near enough of that. So whether
Yeah,
you're the most popular or whatever your ranking or status is, you need support, I think.
that's exactly it. I think it's human nature to want to be liked or fit in or feel popular, regardless of where we are. But I that support is important, especially from parents or role models. So I often say to my kids, like, sit with the person at lunch who doesn't have anyone. I don't care what your grades are. I want you to be kind and thoughtful, and I want you to help out, right? And so I've tried to say that to them. I'm sure they still get that pressure to be, to fit in and to like, and they still get made fun of or picked on. Like that's still the human nature. But for me, as a parenting perspective, I want them to be the kind, helpful people. And so I think that's also where I lean into is the inclusivity of the brand or the business I was building. It's like it's for everyone. I want it to be that way. Um, and that's what I try to teach with the kids too. But that support comes from being accepted. The other thing I often say, and this is more when I talk about teen mental health or parenting, is that we're not trying to fix our kids. Like they're fine the way they are. They just need the support, or like whether it's whatever the support is, whether it's a therapist or whether it's medication or whatever, it's not to fix them, it's just to support them and changing that dialogue. And so I think a lot of parents come across as fixing. And instead of fix, and that doesn't feel good when you're trying to be fixed because then you feel something's wrong with you.
Whether you're an adult or a teen or younger than that, nobody wants to necessarily feel like they're being fixed. And
Yeah.
I really appreciate the perspective that you have on that because I think that goes a long way rather than, well, you're a problem, you're a burden, rather than having that perspective. It's just sometimes what you need is support. Support I think goes a long way. I know it does for me because just when I get a little bit of support for this show or for whatever I'm doing in life, just any amount of like, hey, I was thinking of you and wanted to come by and see how you were doing, that just makes my life. That goes such a long way.
Oh, well, completely, because I'm doing this, building this business by myself. It is so lonely sometimes, and I wish someone would just step in and help me. I'm also a single parent, raising two kids, like doing it all by myself. So yes, for sure, that support. I also have this perspective of like we're trying to support our kids, but I feel as parents we need support because there's no manual, there's no, you know, I often also say like that if you're lucky enough to get have access to therapy or therapist, 1 hour a week is amazing, but it's not the real that's the rest of your week. You have 7 days more of a week that you have to parent your kids, and you need support doing that. And so that's where I come in. It's like self-compassion. How do you make it through um, everything you're doing, not just parenting, but like your business, your work. Yeah.
And whether you're an adult or a teen or a child, counseling, going to a mental health professional and talking to somebody, even if it's just for a period of time, it can make a huge difference because when I go back to when I was at the end of high school, early college, still kind of a teenager in that weird period of after high school before 21, I was having like a really rough time. And
Yeah.
even though I was living at home, it was like everybody had their own life. And I don't think they were really seeing what a
Hmm.
hard time I was having. And really was having a lot of questions about myself, about where I was, where I wanted to go in life, and had a lot of stuff to work through because whether it was at home or at school or wherever, I just wasn't really getting support and wasn't feeling supported in some of the things like I had dreams of doing some things with my life, and my goals were rather lofty. I mean, I wanted to, and I have, in a way, kind of accomplished it. I mean, I'm working for a very big company in the entertainment business these days, and I'm still blown away by where I'm at and the fact that I got through that. But because of the stigma, especially back then, of raising your hand and saying, I need to go talk to a professional. I don't think it's there quite as much as it was 25 years ago, but because of all those factors and just the familial, cultural, oh, we don't do that. Why are you doing that? You're crazy, quote unquote. Don't do that. So I could have really used that kind of guys just to talk and get things off my
Yeah.
chest.
I completely agree with that. And then, although I say on the flip side, my kids have that access and maybe they take it for granted, or they're like, we're done talk. We used to, when they were really small, we called it a talking doctor. And so they don't, so there's always I guess the grass is always greener. Now they have full access and they're like, no, we're done. We've got there. And then, when you don't have access, you wish you had. So I feel, and then we've done rural and urban. We've lived in both. And for me as a parent, access in rural is just so much more challenging, especially when you're looking for specialists. One of my sons has OCD, which is really, really challenging to treat, but also to find a specialist who understands it different from other types of anxiety. And so just navigating all of that, like we have full-time jobs and we have full-time parenting or whatever we're doing, to navigate all of that is really challenging. And I think, your journey itself, like just to know that to hear you say like I'm blown away where I've come from. I don't always give myself that grace too, so I have to stop and pause and say, wow, like I've built this by myself, or I've done this, but like I didn't have all that much support doing it, right? So
Yeah,
yeah.
I can totally relate to that, and I think this is one of the reasons. I feel like I always use this line, but it's one of the many reasons why I like meeting entrepreneurs because I can always find that thing like, aha, we have that connection, and I feel like you and I have this connection of we understand what it's like to have to look within ourselves and be resourceful, and they're great skills to have. And it's really great to be able to say, you know what, I don't always need somebody to hold my hand through life, I can navigate through life and I have the ability and the strength to do it. But even people like us, we need support and there has to be a balance somewhere.
Complete. Absolutely.
And yeah, I mean, I really have come to realize that more as I've gotten a little older, that I personally, I almost think the fact that I'm so resourceful and so cognizant of so many things going on that maybe some might overlook. I almost feel like it works against me a little bit. Maybe that independence and resourcefulness is taken for granted by others, and it can be a bad thing.
Yeah, that is so self-aware, and you've said it so eloquently, but that's exactly my experience, that people just think I don't need help because I manage it on my own. And I'm proud of that, but also it's tiring and also would love the help. I'm also the first person to, I will never say no to helping someone else, right? Like you're going to reach out, I'm going to help you. I'm going to connect you. I'm going to use LinkedIn. Because I want someone to do that for me, but like we all get ahead when we help each other. And uh, the most frustrating times I've had in building the business, but also my career has when I've come across people who don't do that or who don't follow through or who don't say, "Oh yeah, I'm happy to introduce you." Like who is that serving? And so yeah, that's a huge frustration that I come across.
And I just don't want to take any of that credit you just gave me away for being eloquent. But the only reason that that came out so eloquently is because I've thought about it so darn much over the course of my life. It's been like a constant struggle for me. So seeing your background, what you're advocating for, I knew that this was going to be great. Not only hopefully for the audience and for you, but for me who loves to talk about this kind of stuff and is probably long overdue to really talk about it. So
Yeah. I would also just add that a lot of people pivot or start a business because they're not happy with what they were doing in their career or they want to do something else. That's not necessarily my case. I love my work. I love working for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I love global health, the travel. Like I get so much fulfillment and like I love that work. I just found something else that I found needed to do or passionate about doing, and it's an and, not an or. And so that has been a unique journey too, because it's been a pivot, but also ingrained in what I'm doing. And so, yeah, you don't always have to like, turn off the first part of your career to go do the second part.
Oh, absolutely. And one quick note, I tried to mute myself while I coughed there and I absolutely failed. So I apologize to everybody for that. I'm now not batting 1,000 on that one, but I really can relate because I myself am doing this podcast while working right now. I'm working like 60-ish hours a week at my day job. So you can do it, but I mean, having a little bit of support, somebody to just kind of cheer you on, it goes a long way.
Yeah. And people had said to me, like, why don't you start your own podcast? And yes, it's a great idea. And I have lots to talk about, but I found that being on other people's platforms and having these conversations for me is one better use of my time right now, prioritization, but also I get more out of it because these conversations go in different directions and fill different needs, right? I can talk about my journey as a parent and teen mental health. I can talk about the brand and the business and the intersections, but there's not enough time in the day to really do all of that. So yeah,
It's
it's
hard enough with even I'll taking a step back and say I'm working largely like remote. I do go to the office a little bit, but even with all this extra time, it's still difficult. So to just for you to just tackle the business you're doing, raising kids, et cetera, I mean, you got a full plate.
oh yes.
So
Completely.
let's talk a little bit about the actual journey because you had Earth Consulting at one point. You kind of did a transition there. And then it kind of looks like you went back into more of the regular working world. And now you're doing this. So, kind of talk about your journey a little bit and how you wound up here.
Yeah. All of my work experience prior to this Sam and Leo business was very much entwined with global health consulting and the Gates Foundation. It just took on different forms. So either I worked directly for the foundation, I worked as a consultant to different nonprofits funded by them, or or I was a full-time staff person at a nonprofit um, funded by them. So kind of it all was like the same genre, but different forms of it, and at different points where I could give more time. So when I had my kids, I would do consulting. I could be more part-time and flexible. When they were back in school full-time, I went and took a full-time position. So kind of ebbed and flowed that way, all in the same vein of global health. And mostly I would say for the most part in R&D, so in vaccines, drugs, and diagnostics, in the places where this is a little bit higher level thinking, but in market failure. So mostly the Gates Foundation funds things where pharma and biotech aren't going to step in and that they need that investment. This is all before COVID, obviously, so things look a little bit different now. But so it's always in the places usually where it's developing country, tuberculosis, malaria. I worked on Ebola vaccine. And then when COVID happened, the world became very aware of vaccines very quickly. I wasn't traveling. I had sitting on this idea of the teen products for a little while. And so I had more time. And so self-funded, started, like I mentioned, down the path of body care because I noticed that there wasn't clean body care and really went into, and I'm a data person. I wanted to see what was in the Gen Z space. So 2020 was a lot of Gen Z data coming out. And what was really important was well, I would say environmentally friendly, inclusivity, gender inclusive. It doesn't have to be necessarily LGBTQ, but just like it's for everybody. It doesn't really matter what it is. And that kind of clean formulation. And then through different things with production, I would say supply chain with COVID, things like that. It was kind of, and I was going through a divorce at the time. So a lot going on. I had paused that in some ways, although the product, people really like the product. And like I mentioned before, that's when I started looking at the vitamins and realized that there really was this really big white space in teen vitamins. And so found manufacturers I can work with. There's not a lot of innovation in vitamins. So like, a melatonin's a melatonin, immunity, elderberry, echinacea, like there's not a lot there, but it's how you put it together, how it tastes, the texture, and then the dosage. And so mine are actually all safe for age 4 and older. So anyone can take them. And like to your point about the eyes, I'll talk about the eyes one in particular, but I wanted something that was for everyone, but really packaging and insight was more geared towards the tween teen because that's the market that wasn't being served. The two that I was leaning on is the eyes. So it's lutein, which has been around forever as a capsule. And I was like, why is it not as a gummy? Like we're all using the one organ we're using all the time and not taking a vitamin for. And so that was like a no-brainer for me. Also because I would say we all have this guilt around screen time. And like the guilt doesn't serve anyone. It is what it is. We're on our screens. Like either you're looking for blue light blocking glasses or nothing, right? And so that was one, but it also was a way to talk about screen time with kids and parents. And then the other big one was the energy one, where I was seeing kids drinking energy drinks that no one should be taking, but especially like 10, 11-year-olds. And so we as parents don't even know what the alternative is to that. So that's why the B complex, no caffeine. And so that's what I've leaned into with that. And it's kind of now you're seeing it take on a life of its own. I'm a finalist for Whole Foods program. We can talk about this later where to find me, but like once people taste it and see it, they're like, yes, I'm in, but they're not naturally looking for it. And that's the other place where I want more storytelling and brand awareness, because not just for the teens, but for all of us, like how we take care of our body and body awareness. And then I think there's a lot of brand extension. Like we haven't even hit on gut health or brain focus, kids who are in sports. Like there's so much else there that we can do some brand extension on. This is just the beginning.
So that you said a lot of really good things there. I can't help but to tell one quick story though. about energy drinks. And this is going back almost 20 years. I was working at a company that functions, they broadcast 24/7, 365. And I was called in to work overnight. So my shift was like 1 a.m. to 9 a.m. And just a really bizarre overnight shift. It's bad enough when you gotta work 10 to 6 or 11 to 7. They had a 1 to 9 shift. And for whatever reason, so usually my soft drink or pick me up of choice, especially back then, is to maybe have like a Coke or something. But I thought it would be a great idea to have whatever it was. Like I think it might have been a Red Bull, I'm not sure. But I had one Red Bull and I'm thinking I think I might have had it for another overnight shift and it went over okay. For some reason on this night, that obviously didn't like kill me, but I'm trying to run equipment. We're on the air. It's a lot of money involved, etc. And I'm finding that I'm just jittering, trying to press buttons and trying to be on air to, at the very least, a nationwide audience. It probably went more than that. And I can tell you a little more about that once we're done. But basically, I told myself after that because there was a crash after that where I went from being so hyped up that I was jittery. And then after that wore off, I'm just, really run down and on a down. Now I got through the shift, I survived and everything, but I have never drank another one of those drinks. And I always, anytime somebody talks about energy drinks, I always think of that night. And I can't imagine the effect and how that can be for somebody younger than somebody who was in their late 20s at the time. Can't imagine the effect.
Yeah. Well, and add three of those in a day or like that, like I also they're seeing vaping. They're self-medicating in many ways. Maybe it's not addiction, it's not an addiction in the sense of like alcohol or other drugs yet, hopefully, but there's definitely vaping happening and introduction to nicotine in other ways. And I was seeing the data too of like the ups and downs, right? Like needing the energy drink to get them awake and up and then staying up too late gaming, whatever it is, and then needing something to take them down to go to sleep, whether it's vaping or something else. And that was, I also have a sleep gummy that's a really, really gentle, low dose melatonin that people, adults love as well. But it's this like kind of, medicating to go up and down. And that's definitely not natural rhythms. I understand the energy drink market in terms of who it's geared towards and where it comes from, and there's a hype around it, but it's really not healthy for anybody or 11, 12, 13 year olds. And so one other thing I will say to that is like that body week, you took it and you knew exactly that it didn't feel good. Of the five gummies I have, the two of them, the sleep and the energy ones, that's something like a kid can say, I'm tired or I'm needing more energy. So they can like take the gummies to make for themselves and they know that a body awareness. The other ones are more preventative and like it's more coming from the parents. Like you should take immunity or you should take the relax one now or the eye health one. And they're not going to feel that immediate effect. Like their eyes aren't going to be better, all of whatever. So there is this like kind of play of like a kid starting to understand how their body feels immediately through the sleep and the energy, and the other ones are more preventative and like this is good for my body. And that's a really important awareness because most people aren't aware how their body feels, but definitely kids aren't.
And I think it's important for somebody to be there to have that discussion with them.
Yeah.
And I think it really just goes back to support. And I think, just kind of thinking about the challenges that teenagers face today and how this product coincides with that. I think you touched on a lot of that, and maybe if there's more room to elaborate, I'll let you elaborate on how the two kind of come together to help teenagers feel better and more supported.
Yeah, last thing I would say is I don't think we know what we've just been through with the pandemic and aftermath. And from so many angles. So what is the mental health landscape? How did it impact our kids socially, emotionally, where we're headed with it, um, health wise, physical, mental, all of it. We don't have that data. All we know is that we are coming out of it. We are seeing different things with our kids, my kids in particular, all kids. And so if we don't have that data, but we want to do something, what can we be proactive in? And I think so health, nutrition, if our kids aren't going to eat that healthy, might as well supplement them. And not just a multivitamin, but like that kind of conversation. And then setting them up with that support and resources, like you said. So like coming together from saying, okay, here's if you need someone to talk to, here's ways we can access that. Here's parent support groups, right? I think being vulnerable and talking about your story to other parents or other people in your life so that everyone knows, no one wants to see someone who looks like their life is perfect, right? And they have it all together, right? Being able to be a little vulnerable and share what you're going through helps everyone, I think. And so that's where I'm seeing right now is like we don't have all the answers. We don't know what we've just been through, but like what can we do to work together to get through it?
So, how do we help people who I know that there are people, and I may even at some point in my life have been guilty of gotta always be on the mark, always gotta be perfect. Because sometimes when people are focusing too much on perfectionism, you're not really seeing some of the issues that they're really having. How do you feel is the best way to navigate an issue like that?
Yeah, such a good question. I definitely don't, I'm not a professional with a bunch of letters after my name of all of this, but what I've seen is a couple things. One is role modeling. I use this one story. A good friend of mine has 4-year-old twin daughters. And what we were going on a walk, and she was saying how the one daughter every morning is rebuilding her Lego and has to rebuild it perfectly the same way every single morning and gets super frustrated and angry when it's not rebuilt exactly the same way. And I was like, well, you know what? It's probably because, and this is only what I'm thinking, but I'm going to share it with you and you can take it or leave it. But all she sees around her is perfection. She sees two parents who make the world perfect for her and go to work and bills are paid and meals are on the table and she doesn't see you mess up. So what if you start role modeling, I cut the carrot the wrong way, or I spilled something by accident, or just showing your own imperfections allows our kids to see that the world isn't perfect. If we keep showing that everything's done well and done together, and I'm guilty of it as well, but the more that they can see how we role model it and how we problem solve and solutions, it makes it easier for them. And so when you step back and see that the kid's perspective and they just see this, they can't live up to it. They can't make the world perfect the way they see it. And so if you step back and give everyone in your life a little bit of grace and show them the imperfections, I think that allows room for everyone. So that's where I come from this. Um, I think it's hard because we're all trained socially, right, to make it look perfect. And social media is guilty of that. Like, it looks perfect on social media. Um, this kind of culture of succeeding and succession and what does success look like is usually tied to monetary gain or titles. So we're up against a lot that makes it challenging to be that way, but I don't think it serves our kids, especially for them to see that. So that's where I come from with it.
No, I totally agree. And I think you said something somewhere along the line talking about perfectionism being perfect. And it makes me think of somebody that I used to know who I cared about very much, but I always felt like their need to always be perfect with everything kind of got in the way of things. Like they weren't able to just say, you know what? This didn't go the way it should have. I messed up, just couldn't really bring themselves to ever have that perspective on things. And I
Mhm.
always felt like if they did, that our connection with each other would have probably been a little bit different. And everybody's molded differently, but there's no reason to put that kind of pressure on yourself.
No, but we do for sure.
And that time I did it right and actually muted myself, so nobody heard me cough. So, yay for me. Speaking of giving yourself a pat on the back. So, talk a little bit about launching the business itself because you did consulting, which is a business unto itself as well. But now you're being an entrepreneur, you're putting yourself behind this product. And you even said that things that your children were going through kind of made the light bulb go
Mhm.
off and may have given you a little extra push. Just talk a little bit about all of that and getting this off the ground.
Yeah, that's a whole process that I sometimes can't believe I've done myself because it's obviously not my background. I'm pretty good in the operations strategy, finance space and how to get a project done. This is completely different, launching a product. I have had support or leaned into early on some brand marketing or logo and design, package design, but for the most part, it's been me managing all of it. I don't have a team or staff at the moment, just bring in people when I need to. But really, it's me. I feel like it's a lot of trusting my intuition and gut of like, that resonates with me. That's what I would want as a consumer. When I see it, I know it. I might not necessarily be the one to design the packaging, but when I see it, I know that it resonates. I think there's so many tools, almost overwhelming tools to launch a product now in terms of, are you e-commerce? Are you direct to consumer? Are you on Amazon? Are you on a shelf? Like the multi-channel thing is very challenging to navigate and overwhelming. I'm kind of leaning into just a couple of those channels where I saw work. A lot of it is throwing darts to see what works. I am self-funded. I think at some point I will need to do a raise, and that's a whole nother beast to navigate. A lot of it is one foot in front of the other and really just prioritizing a to-do list of like, what are the three things that are going to move the needle today? Because I can't do it all. Like if you saw my to-do list, it's miles long and I can't, and I don't think it's healthy to try to achieve all of that. I also think that like the productivity specialists are overwhelming as well because you could think all day about how am I going to use my time in a day and what's the best use of my time, but we're all human and we get distracted. And so I think it's kind of giving yourself grace and also prioritizing. So I look at like what are the couple of things, and each day it's doing that. Um, and I definitely don't have all the answers. So sometimes I say I don't know what I don't know. And sometimes that's blissful because then I don't I'm not so hard on myself. But other times I am frustrated because I want to be further along than I am. And that is probably the hardest part is that.
So, what's next for Sam and Leo? What other areas, if you've even thought about it, would you like to focus on and put vitamin out for?
Yeah, that's a good question. I was really over the vitamins lasted vitamins launched last year, and I was really adverse and opposed to going on Amazon, but then I did and realized that's where most of my sales were coming from, and that had its own hiccups and challenges, but that's where people are buying. And then I've also been hesitant to be on a retail shelf because people have to find like there's interest for me to be on a retail shelf. The retailers are really have been reaching out. Although getting on the shelf is one thing, it's getting off the shelf, someone buying you and finding you. And I've been really hesitant to do that because that requires so much resources and marketing. I think that's where I'm headed to right now and leaning in because there is that interest to be on a shelf and it is a product differentiator. I'm not taking away or cannibalizing someone else's product or brand. It's adding to, it's a new offering. And so that's interesting to retailers because they don't, that's what they want, right? You're adding a selection, you're bringing someone else into the store. So for the business, I'm looking at what shelves can I be on, what are appropriate shelves and expanding, and then growing from there and getting some support, like we said, support to do that. And then long term, it's that brand extension offering more and looking past that and even international. I think there's space for this, everywhere. I think the teen market space is interesting. I don't think, you're capturing people for a shorter period of time, but if their products are safe for age 4 and older, you're getting them through that period as well. And then there are many adults who like prefer to take a gummy than a pill too. So I think there is an adult market there as well. But for me, going back to your first question and back to the square one is it's the impact and being able to give back. So for me, it's going to be able to drive that revenue to give back to nonprofits and mental health and show that impact. So it's combining the business with that impact that's super important to me. And that's where I would like to have the most see the most growth.
So, are you going to need to just kind of keep doing what you're doing, and then the light bulb will go off like, oh, that's an area that I can add to the line, and we can focus on that area as well.
Yes, I definitely followed. I'm looking at the trends. There's a lot of trend analysis. So what I saw this past year was a focus in sports, nutrition, gut health, and then definitely some in the mushroom space. So I think I don't have the resources to do that right now, but just keep following those trends and what's interesting, I think is an easy add-on for that. Um, and so I'll keep in that space. And then in terms of fundraising for the business or getting in partners, it's not necessarily for the inventory or for like the manufacturing, but it is for that marketing growth and brand awareness. I think there's a lot of partnership potential, whether it's with celebrities, the Lady Gagas and Billie Eilishes of the world who are into mental health, or is it, you know, just partnerships with other brands who want to work in the mental health space. I think there's just so much to be done in that space.
Well, speaking of your brand and partnerships and all of that, how can people find you? How can they work with you? How can they learn more about you? How can they get the product, etc.?
All of it. So I would say start with our website is shopsamandleo.com, all spelled out. And you can get all that information there. Follow us on social media, especially on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and that is at shop Sam and Leo. And then I'm happy to give out my email address to contact me at Dara, so it's Dara at shopsamandleo.com for partnerships and interests. And we are sold on the Shopify website, but also on Amazon. And it starts hopefully seeing us on shelves soon. But happy to talk to anyone. If you want samples, if you want to try it, if you have ideas for partnerships, I'm open to all of that.
All righty. Well, look, I think what you're doing, what you're advocating for, standing behind, I think is absolutely amazing. And I'm so glad that we were able to come together here on this Saturday afternoon, Saturday morning, depending on time zone, and talk about all the amazing things you're doing. I really appreciate you coming on and spending a little time with me.
Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
As did I. So thanks again for being here. This again is Dara Erck, and she is the founder of Sam and Leo, which is a gummy vitamin that will help mental health and improve mental health for teenagers and perhaps even adults as well. So
Exactly.
thank you very much, Dara, for being here. I am Mark Schmidt, and you just listened to Mark My Words. Have a great day. Thanks again for taking time out of your busy day to listen to Mark My Words. If you would like to connect with me beyond the show, you can find me on LinkedIn at Mark Schmidt, where I will be talking about entrepreneurship, careers, and anything else that is on my mind. You can also connect with me on Twitter and Instagram at Nimrod1979 and Nimrod79 respectively. This podcast also has a page on Instagram at Mark My Words. And finally, if you want to leave me a voicemail or check out what I'm up to with the podcast, come find me at podpage.com/mark-my-words. Thanks again for listening, and I'll be back with a new episode soon. Bye for now.